Alrighty, what is going on, Macropod peeps? I am very much really looking forward to this conversation with Dr. Yael Joffe. Guys, please take notes on this one, and we're really going to sell this one a lot harder just because this is a deep dive into some genomics on nutritional genomics or nutrigenomics and the education of it. But Yael is profound person in the space. I mean, author of 4 books, Power of Genetics, Not Just Your Genes, Genes to Plate, the S&P Journal. She's been part of many research things and really just started this whole concept of lifestyle genetics. But beyond that, with her being the founder of 3x4 Genetics and being the CSO, Synergenics has been using that platform, and I loved it. And ever since I've loved it, I've wanted to actually connect with her, and I did. I got to connect at the IHS a few weeks back, and connected with her team and other genomics counselors, and it was amazing. And I wanted to share with you guys real quick a little story about just Yale's character here. I had one question for her after seeing her speech, and I said, "Hey, Yale, what do you think I should do with my speech?" And she said, "Don't read off the slides. Own it, make it your own, and make it genuine and authentic." And those words landed really well, held it in high regard, and apparently I did a great job with my speech, and they kind of want to bring me back. So that's right there is major. But Yale, thank you so much for being here. We know your time's important. We're going to go right into the hour, just trying to lock in as much for you. But can you do a little intro for yourself, and then I'll let Marcos kind of go right into some of his heavy-hitting questions.
Intro myself. I thought you did a great job.
Yeah, or anything maybe you're excited about, how things are going for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're right. I get to play in this amazing space of nutrigenomics or lifestyle genetics. And really what it is, I always describe it as kind of who we are and how we respond to the world around us. So to diet, to lifestyle, to supplements, to stress, to trauma, to exercise, of course. And so like really that essence of who we are, and what a great place to play in. I've been doing this for 26 years, learned a lot along the way. And 3x4 Genetics, which is the company you mentioned, is really kind of my dream and my vision. And everything I learned over the 25 years, like how do you bring that together and create a company or an experience of genetics that really kind of really brings it to fruition or makes it truly personalized. And so this has been my journey: education, building tests, love teaching, really like bringing genetics into the world in a way that we can actually understand it, we can use it, and of course that it's meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Marcos, you're on a mute, brother.
Yeah.
So my first question to you, that's my bad, is so there's a lot of different genes that we're looking at when it comes to the reports and also like the back end stuff. But what are some ones that people should generally be most concerned about, or ones that usually get the most popularity that, like, again, it actually can make a pretty significant difference?
That's a little bit of a trick question for me, and I'll tell you why. Is one of the great challenges in the genetic testing industry is this idea that there's a single gene that is so significant that it's going to change your decision making. So if I've got this gene, I'm going to get Alzheimer's. And if I've got this gene, I'm going to take these supplements. And if I've got this gene, I'm going to run marathons. And the reality is that this has actually been one of the undoings of the genetic testing industry, is making these kind of grand statements based on a single gene. So I always say, the genes we work in, because we don't work in medical genetics, we don't work in drug genetics, we work in this kind of diet lifestyle genetics. And I always say, if you hear someone giving you a supplement recommendation or a diet recommendation based on a single gene, it should be actually a red flag. So that kind of throws your question out a little bit. Having said that, so what is the answer? The answer and the way we do it is we say, well, what are the areas of genetics that are really exciting? Vacation, inflammation, recovery from training, injury susceptibility to training, and I can go on and on. Weight loss resistance. What are the genes that are kind of playing in that space or impacting the kind of, we talk about the biochemistry, the biochemical pathways that determine how we are kind of optimally or not optimally functioning in that space. And we group those genes together. And that's kind of the stuff that we get excited about. However, if I have to choose some genes that are interesting, I will do that. But again, I would never give recommendations on the genes, but there are some genes I absolutely love. So ApoE is interesting because everyone thinks it's like this super bad thing. You got ApoE, what they call the E4 allele. It's like a Alzheimer's gene, it's terrible. And I actually love ApoE. It is one of the most interesting genes you can study. And the reason being is that it's ancestral. So when you look at all genetics, actually, it's what we describe as evolutionary biology, right? Like, how did we evolve? How do we change? And what we're seeing in the world now with the chronic disease that we're seeing is this disconnect between our evolutionary biology, which is our DNA, been around for a very long time, and the diet and lifestyle and exposures that we have in our life right now. And so ApoE, when it was first documented in terms of how we understand it, was the E4 version, which is now regarded as a negative. But when we were hunter-gatherers flying around in the plains of Africa, having the E4 would save your life. Now it's become associated with cognitive decline, memory loss, and Alzheimer's. So I always say, we've got to be careful not to make the kind of these grand judgments around our genes, and rather think, but where did they come from, and what did they teach us, and what were they doing us in our body, and what are the exposures that we have now that are making this gene less kind of promising? So I know big answer to the question.
Well, it was kind of a loaded question intentionally because I had a feeling that it was like, in isolation, these things might mean certain statistical numbers that people have thrown out there. And then actually yesterday, Dr. Martin Seamus kind of explained, the E3, E4 allele with ApoE, you can basically mitigate that potential risk increase with just high intensity training. So it's like you can bring it down to 0. And I was like, all right, fun stat of the day. I did not know that.
And it's not true.
Then maybe okay, well, don't quote
me.
Well,
I would say, again, that's such a simplistic commentary on a single gene. It's exactly what I've been kind of pointing out, is like, you can't actually make that kind of comment on something like a gene, because what is actually the ApoE34 doing in the body, and what is it doing in your body, and what are the other genes that are interacting? There's another gene called TOM40, awesome gene. On one hand, if you have one version of the gene, it's a longevity gene. Awesome. It's going to help determine whether you're one of those who are likely to live into your kind of 90s, 100s. On the other side, it's associated with Alzheimer's. And you can never look at ApoE without looking at TOM40 and a couple of others. So I don't like these kind of simplistic interpretations where you're just throwing out like a blanket comment, like, oh, if you do this, you'll get that. Because actually, E4 is an inflammatory version of the gene.
Okay.
It's pro-inflammatory.
Yeah.
And what is one of the worst training regimes we can do that is pro-inflammatory?
I mean, things that drive up cortisol, obviously. So, yeah.
So what do we probably, for someone with E4 and have other inflammatory stuff, we probably don't want to choose training that is pro-inflammatory. So I wouldn't have them doing high impact. And so, well, maybe a little bit, but not a huge amount. So sorry, I just... It's that what we have to protect against,
that's
the nuance we love.
No, but that's, in this use case, trying to think back to what he was or was not doing. I mean, again, I think it was more to like strengthen the argument of, again, it's hard to not try to make generalizations or blanket statements to try to help people for their better, for things that we know that can generally be seen as good. We're going to call it generally recognized as safe. It's our GRASS statement, if you will. Like, hey, a little dose of this once a week is probably not the end of the world. A little hormetic stressor, right? Not going to kill you. But we want to live in that space, right? Like, so, but again, that's why it makes it so complex, this particular area. I mean, probably well beyond mine and Seamus' scopes because we're not geneticists or things of that, but like to dive into it and the reason why I started with that particular question, my main physician in our Las Vegas office is, again, he's more so looking at that ApoE one. So it was a great place to start. I didn't even have to bring that out. I think you kind of knew that. As again, there seems to be like, there's more rigor behind that one in particular, but then you're here to say, hey, it's kind of quote useless unless you're looking at maybe 2 or 3 other ones in addition to. And like, I would love for that to be the thing I go back to him with, hey, we want these other SNPs or these other particular instances so that you can actually say with a higher level of competence, like this might be something that would be concerning for our patient, right?
Absolutely. And that's what we do at 3x4, right? And that was like my big aha moment. So like 8-9 years ago, I've been building genetic tests for like 25 years. And 8-9 years ago, I was like, I think I'm doing something wrong. And I think the industry is doing something wrong, that we're attaching ourselves to these genes and then making these kind of comments about it.
Yeah.
But actually, when we think about Alzheimer's or cognitive decline or performance or inflammation, we want to look at all the genes, and it's not two or three, it might be 10 or 15 or 20. And we want to be able to score them so you don't have to figure out yourself. Like, we want to figure that out for you, and we want to tell you actually. So here's an example. I have E34 of ApoE, and I have a family history of Alzheimer's. And so my whole life, because I had this E4, I believed and attached myself to this idea that I was going to get Alzheimer's early in life. Because, that's how we perceived ApoE to be. And then, of course, years went on, and this is even well into my genetics career. And I started understanding that there's all these other genes, and also there's a lot of stuff I can do. There's a lot of environmental things I can do. There's a lot of dietary things I can do. And we built this polygenic score. So it's a group of genes around cognitive function and cognitive decline. And when I got my own genetic test from my own company, I was like, wow, actually my susceptibility to developing Alzheimer's wasn't that high. Why? Because I only had the E34. But actually all the other genes, like TOM40 that I just mentioned, all the inflammatory genes that contribute towards developing, I didn't have. So I had spent my whole life thinking I was like a walking case for Alzheimer's based on one gene, but actually in the greater context. So I'm like a living example of how we need to be careful of, same with MTHFR, right? The MTHFR gene, or methylation gene, I talk about the industrial complex of MTHFR. So a whole lot of things went wrong in the genetic testing industry in the last couple of decades, and one of them was MTHFR, where entire companies were built on testing one SNP, MTHFR, or maybe two MTHFR SNPs, And what are these companies, when you truly look at them, they're supplement companies.
Yeah. No,
so
that's so true.
They're testing MTHFR, and every company that's generally testing MTHFR, either they're selling supplements on the website, or they own a supplement company that they're sending you to. And so people were going, I've got the MTHFR defect, I've got the MTHFR mutation. And I'm like, no, it's just the SNP. And it is just the SNP. It's just the SNP. And so I'm really on my soapbox about what damage we have done in the industry, and collective we, because I never did that. But in terms of making people think that if they have one SNP of one variant, they should buy, and there's someone in this industry where he would sell 30 different supplements for MTHFR. And then what happens when you do that is you over-methylate the individual, and they end up feeling worse than they did before. And then he had another protocol to sell 17 more supplements to overcome. So this is, you've done a great job, Marcus, of kind of identifying in a very short time, what are the challenges that we've seen in the genetic testing industry?
Yeah.
Actually, we can do better.
Yeah. No, I love that. Great questions, Marcos. Yeah, amazing. The way you explained is amazing. I think it's also true too, because with the 3x4, I've seen other genomics and other things, and I've done deep dives on other companies, and I'm like, yeah, they're just kind of not creating a harmony of these stories. Because I've gone through my 3x4 consult, and in 30 minutes, yes, I am compromised for a few joint bone collagen things, a few inflammatory things. There's a lot going on there from an inflammatory state that'll lead me into performance injuries. But when we think of the negative, then what's my thought? Oh, they're going to tell me a supplement. They're going to tell me to do this. Yeah, right. As a consumer, you kind of get down a rabbit hole of if I just had the one supplement to fix me. It's like, whoa. It's not true. Also, when I went through the 3x4 counseling, they were saying these are what's protective of you. So even though you may have this inflammation, this joint issue, this is protecting you. But make sure you protect this. This is helping out. And these are some other areas you can look at. And that's what I really loved about it. I feel like it's a whole story. There's a whole synergy there with the 3x4 that I've never seen anywhere before. It really brings a harmony of things, not just, hey, you have one thing wrong, go take this supplement,
Yeah. I like the word harmony. I'll take it.
Yeah.
So it's been a minute since I've even looked at my own report, because it's, again, we did it back in June of last year, Seamus. So crazy. But you guys have particular categories that these genes kind of fall into. which to me, like in the explanation piece for like a lay person trying to explain it to an even probably more lay person, right? Like it makes sense. It's like, all right, cool. Based on all the findings or everything that we know right now, these are the things that you might be more susceptible to, things that you're, there's a potential susceptibility to it, things that are like working in your favor, right? So how did you create these categories out of curiosity? Because I know that there's quite a few. And I mean, like, I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have even thought to like think about the genes being able to pay attention to like the blood pressure risk factor or like caffeine sensitization, et cetera, et cetera. So what prompted that?
Yeah, Yael, before you say that, though, I know you have a great answer. I just want to reinforce this for the listeners. If you've done a genomics test before, they probably just send you a 100-page thing with the gene that you have and then copy about it. What Yael has done is, hold on, let's fractionalize this into like what's the most important for you, and she's done it in a compressed frame. So anyways, go ahead, Yael. Sorry about that.
Good point. It may sound complicated, but when you actually see the report, it's done very simply. It's a great question, Marcus. It's a great question. The way I did it, well, I spent a lot of time thinking about, so I spent 2 years like contemplating the stuff before I actually built anything. And I was thinking of the concept of health. So, or disease, or exercise, or weight, or whatever. And I was thinking, so one thing that happened to me is when, I started off as a dietitian, miserable journey for me. I really didn't get anything from it. And that's when I discovered genetics in the year 2000 and then grew into nutrigenomics. But one thing that happened to me is in 2000, I also discovered this amazing world of functional medicine. Now, for those of you listening who doesn't know what functional medicine is, it's really trying to understand what is happening in my body that is not working in the most optimal way, optimal function that I can go and address. So we talk about things like root cause analysis. If I have these symptoms, why am I having them? And can I go back and discover why they started and address the root cause? So I was very much trained in kind of root cause medicine and functional medicine. We call it upstream medicine, going upstream, go to the beginning. And so when I was thinking about 3x4, I was very much thinking with that lens, because I was thinking, where do we start? And that kind of say pure health. And then we land up downstream as developing all these conditions, or whether gaining weight or having injuries in training so I went back to kind of source, and I thought, what is the original kind of function of our body that is the most important thing? And that's the cell, right? The cell. And I was like, what are the processes in the cell that are going to have the greatest impact on how our cells are functioning? Detoxification, inflammation, oxidative something. So that's the first category. We always want to think about how optimally are cells functioning, because if we don't get that right, we're not going to get anything right. And then I went down and I thought, like, what's the next level after that? And I thought, okay, well, how are the systems in our body functioning? So systems would be, how does our glucose and insulin function? How do our hormones function? So the second category in 3x4 is all the systems in our body. It's collagen and joints, it's bone health, it's hormones, it's cognitive, so that we spoke about that, like memory loss, but it's also mood and behavior. I love that one. Anxiety, depression, ADD, ADHD, things like that. Then we're getting kind of starting at the core thing, and then we're kind of moving down. Cardiovascular, so, as in blood pressure, blood clotting, lipids. And then we got into the space I love, which is weight management. So when I became a dietitian, I was so horrified at this idea that there was still a belief that if you ate these calories and you burnt up these calories, you'd lose weight. Because the reality is, that's not true. And at that time, like 5% of diets were successful, 5%. Don't know what it's gone up to now, but it's like, why do we gain weight differently? Why is it for some of us it's really hard to lose weight and for others easy? So I wanted to understand that, and that's what that category is how do I experience hunger and satiety and appetite? Why do I snack all the time or binge eat? How do I store energy? So I wanted to kind of break everything down. And then, of course, exercise, which I love. And you've mentioned it, both of you, what is my potential for training? Why do I respond to training in different ways? Why is it I need like 2 days of recovery and maybe you only need 1 day? And why do I keep on getting an Achilles injury? And then, of course, the last category is nutrients. How do we utilize and metabolize vitamins and minerals and gluten and caffeine and everything? So the way we built it, and there's 36 of these, what we call pathways, is starting off at that core thing, which is our cell, and then working our way down through the way the body functions, and understanding that if we want to know where we dysfunctioning, if there's such a word, we need to think about starting at the top and kind of, I hope that's a decent explanation of how we kind of set it up.
Love it.
Yeah. I do have one more question, though, kind of related to that, though. So how do we know if these genes have the certain, alleles, right, or certain expression? Is it like some sort of like bioinformatics? They're like, hey, we've seen a certain percentage of people that hold these, and then there's like an epigenetic study that's going into this, like to like determine whether or not, like, again, like, how do you know? Here, hold on. Let me go pull mine up again and go back to the one that said that, like, the little shield on the icon there.
That's protective.
Sorry, the star. Yeah, the star, the ACTN3RR for power expression. How do we know that that one is supposedly going to be a potentiator for that?
Okay, well, that's a great example. So for those listening, ACTN is a gene that is involved in really in muscle actin, right? Fibers of the muscle. And so there's two different versions of it. RR, some people have, you have RR, that's fantastic, and XX. And we know that those who've got the RR version, because remember, we just talk about versions of genes, it's not wrong or right, it's just, do you have version A or version B, are associated with having more potential for power training. So how do we know that? So I'll give you an example of that gene, good choice there, of a study that was done on that gene. So what they did was they took a whole lot of army recruits, right? Because when you tell a soldier they have to do something, they generally do it. Really good example. And they took them into a training environment, a gym environment, and they basically did two things. The first thing that they did is they said, we're going to put you on a bicycle and you're going to do 2 hours of basically cycling. And we're going to do that for 12 weeks. And we're going to see whether your kind of VO2 max, your heart rate variability, like what happens to your body. Did you get more fit, essentially? Did you get more fit? And then we're going to take the same kind of study, but we're going to take them onto the gym floor and we're going to do weight training. And we're going to measure muscle mass growth. Okay. And then when we finish doing this, we're going to test your genes and we're going to see whether you have the RR version or the XX version. And what they found in this study is that let's talk about the weight training ones, is when they took them onto them, they did weight training every single day for 12 weeks, which is quite significant. Those that had the RR version of the gene, they experienced significant muscle mass growth. Yes. They were more powerful and they gained muscle mass. And those that had the XX didn't. Now, the opposite happened on the bicycle. Those that had the RR did not see the fitness gains that others did. So we know, so that's one way we know. We actually test it and we see. The other way we know is, one thing we're very strict at 3x4 is we only test genes that we can see how they change in the body in some way.
Okay.
Biochemistry, right? So does the RR version change the muscle fiber in some way? And has that been done in a research lab? Can we see that those with the RR have a different configuration to their muscle fibers than someone who's got an XX? So we do two things. We want to see, is the research telling us that someone with RR actually is more powerful and more likely to become more powerful with training? And do we know why that's happening? What changed in that muscle fiber? So we are very kind of particular about the research, but this is the kind of research, that's an example of that we use to be able to decide what gene do we include in our report. Because I could put in 500,000 SNPs into a report and sell it to you for the exact same price as I sell 3x4. But actually, there's no value to you in me doing that. So I want to make sure if I put a gene into a report, I want to make sure there's something really, really insightful and informative for you to understand about yourself. So I'm going to guess, if you've got actin 3 and a couple of other ones, you respond to weight training, you're probably very strong. And we talk about the ability to generate power in short times, whereas an endurance athlete with a different genes would be able to do long distance, but not at that superpower thing.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's I love how Marcos throws out a gene and like the directory in your mind just goes, all right, yeah, this is the study. It's like amazing to see like an educator like yourself do that. And by the way, when Yale dropped the sulforaphane biochemistry in 4 minutes, probably the best 4 minutes at the IHS, because I was like, I could see it as she's like breaking it down. I was like, this is great. Sulforaphane's great, by the way. But
Perfect.
there was something there, Marcos. I want to kind of ask this question because this is the area you love, and this is kind of the area that Marcos and I, for like the last 3 years, are like still very much head over heels, or like basically just locking in all the time. Weight loss was kind of the thing you're talking about. Well, there's a bunch of weight loss drugs right now, and part of this genomics and this genetics kind of thing is like the pharmacogenetics, right? I just heard recently, I don't know if it was from someone from the team or someone recently, but they were saying, oh yes, this person was on a set of GLP-1s or GP-1s or whatever. They weren't necessarily getting any traction with it. But then they tried another one, even a low dose, and like, oh, things started finally going. Yeah, have you had any like, using the 3x4 to then kind of integrate into like a weight loss drug model as well?
It's a good question, and this is where I'm probably not going to come across as being real. So first of all, my expertise is not drug genetics.
Okay.
And so I don't generally follow literature, but almost every single drug we take will be determined by our genes, because drugs determine how we metabolize genes. I'll give you an interesting statistic though. Every single drug we take, and it doesn't matter if it's aspirin or GLP-1 agonist, 50% of us will metabolize that drug like the drug manufacturers say we're going to. So if they say, you're going to take this drug and after 24 hours you're going to experience this and it's going to last for 3 days and then you're not going to feel it, 50% of us are going to have that experience. 5% of us, the drug is going to stay in our body longer than that 50%, and we're going to have a longer exposure to that drug, which sometimes could be good, maybe in the case of GLP-1, but maybe not good. What if it's warfarin, which is for blood clotting? So what if it was a drug that we didn't want in our system longer and actually could cause trouble? So 25% of us would keep that drug in our body longer. And the other 25% of us, we metabolize the drug very quickly. The best way to describe it is thinking of caffeine, because caffeine is in essence a drug, just a really nice and delicious one. But it's the same conversation, right? So 50% of us will be medium metabolizers of caffeine. So, they recommend drink 3 to 4 cups of coffee a day. I love the recommendation. Well, if I drink 3 to 4 cups of coffee a day, I won't be able to sit still. I'll be like running crazy around the block. So I'm not in that 50%. So 50% would be like a medium metabolizer of caffeine. 25%, me, are slow metabolizer of caffeine. So I drink coffee and the caffeine is metabolized very slowly, which means it stays in my body. I drink another cup and I've still got caffeine for the first cup and it stays. And obviously I have all these kind of experiences of caffeine. And there's others, and I always find it hard to believe, another 25%, and I'm just using 25% as an average, who will drink coffee and 5 minutes later it's good, they feel fantastic, but an hour later they're ready for another cup. And they can have coffee before bed, and they got it. So It's exactly the same with every single drug and with something like GLP. So you will not see any individual having the same response to a GLP-1 agonist in terms of how effective it is, how ineffective, what the side effects are, how they experience it. But on that note, GLP-1s are definitely one of the most interesting things happening in the pharmaco world. And every time I go to a conference, the conversations around GLP-1s are shifting. So in the beginning, it was like they're the best thing ever that's ever been invented and everything, it's going to save the world. Then a year later, we were talking about, do we really understand the side effects of GLP-1 and what the implications and consequences are of taking it? Then, and depending on the conference, right? If you go to an anti-aging longevity conference, it's all like, oh, it's cognitive and it's this and that.
Yeah.
What we know about GLP-1s is that they definitely do something significant to our bodies. And it's definitely helping with weight loss. No doubt about it. We do not know the long-term consequences of GLP-1s. We just do not. It's so early for us. We have no idea. And the third thing, and you'd appreciate this because you're in the space, is it doesn't change behavior, only for the time that you're injecting yourself. But it doesn't change our relationship with food or with our bodies or with our story that we've been telling ourselves through history. So it's going to work beautifully until such time as you're not taking it. And so we haven't really solved anything.
Mhm.
And we also haven't understood the individual and who they are and why they lose or gain weight in that way. So we think you can still really great value in understanding a genetic test of an individual and saying, what is your weight journey? What is your experience of appetite and hunger? Because the moment you stop that GLP-1, if appetite and hunger is your thing, it's going to bounce back. And we need to be able to manage that. So that's just my personal opinion about where we are. I'm watching closely.
No. I love that. I mean, I know Marcus got some thoughts, but just before he goes, it's like the behavior thing is very important for us, being like, health and wellness boards. I think for us, we really ask those questions that are deeper on top of being on a pharmacological supplementational thing, because it doesn't solve that issue. Yeah, you could stop your hunger cues, but now we're running into different problems because of you're solving something, but now it's a trade-off for something else. So yeah, Marcos, what do you got, man?
Okay, so you mentioned the 25, 50, 25. Is that kind of across the board, across all the categories or is it...
I'm just generalizing it, but so I'm using like a number that is kind of a general, but it'll be something like that. There'll be a group that are medium metabolizers, a group that are fast, and a group that are slow. Yeah.
Is it kind of like a normal distribution that most people will probably be somewhere in the medium category and then kind of tapers like a bell curve, more or less?
Yes, most times it is a normal distribution.
Okay, cool. So I can handle that. I took stats.
Yeah,
I am a math guy. Oh yeah. I have another fun fact about the calculator. Did I show you the trick, Seamus, that you can literally put the percent sign after minusing like 100 minus 20% will give you the number 80, but like contextually it doesn't make sense.
Math don't make sense, bro.
No, I know. Someone showed me that on an iPhone calculator the other day. I was like, what? That breaks all syntax errors. My brain exploded, literally. Anyway, so with regards, down this pathway, metabolization, we kind of understand that. And honestly, anecdotally, we actually talk about this with some patients too. Hey, timing your injection of your therapy could make a difference of when you have the greatest level of fullness. We can go to Mr. Hari's book where he's talking about it. It was like the next day I would like wake up and I wasn't hungry. Granted, he could be embellishing a little bit, but he basically said the day after the injection. Other people, it's like day 2, day 3, right? So there's just these different variances. So we say, hey, anywhere from about 2 to 3 days is probably when you have like the peak effect of this medication. But individual results will vary. And it's like really like, like we now know to tell people that. And they're like, oh yeah, like if I take it on Thursday, Sunday, which is normally my binge day, I can't do it, which is, again, it's important to know that your particular biology literally does make a huge deal in that. And it's like you're saying too, if we could crack the code of, whatever, lining up that may have been, hey, probably by day 3, you should probably time it here ahead of time would be an even better game changer. And like Seamus said, if if it's the combination GLP GIP or just GLP, right, those make a difference because that individual would probably work better on that. Like, it's really interesting and fascinating to think that something internally can help drive those decisions, but obviously there's further testing that's needed to be done to actually figure out how those things correlate, right, and how those all respond. And I mean, it's probably a super fascinating time for those individuals, like you said, that have that area of expertise or specialty within your field, which, again, the fact that there's like a niche within this niche is kind of wild to me.
I mean, not to interrupt you, Marcus, but just as an example of that. So we work with a lot of elite soccer players in the MLS.
Okay.
And we test them, and caffeine is an interesting one because actually caffeine is an ergogenic aid, right? We use caffeine to drive performance.
Yeah.
But we respond very differently to it. So we use genetics to determine the timing of caffeine for an elite athlete and the dose of caffeine for an elite athlete. So we know that if you're a fast metabolizer, we actually need to be able to give caffeine just before they get on the field to play a game. But and probably need to top it up a few times. But if you're a slow metabolizer, you actually need to time it back 45 minutes to an hour to get the peak effect. Yep. So it's exactly the same thing that you were talking about is if we know how an individual responds, whether it's to caffeine or GLP-1 or to a statin or warfarin, whatever it is, or an anxiety medication, we can time the intervention to optimize the response for the individual. So it's really like super fun stuff. This when
okay, so here's a question. So a lot of people in training talk about like reps in reserve, right? They do people that are pretty trained understand that they got like 1 rep left in them or 2 reps left. They do a pretty good job of estimating their ability to go to failure, right? Do individuals have, like, if you were to grab all those soccer players as part of that study, right, and say, when do you think you should be taking caffeine? Do those people kind of already know through anecdotal experience?
Well, elite athletes are a different group because actually they're very dialed in. They're very dialed into their body. However, so what's interesting is recovery from training. So they would do a perceived, recovery. It was like a questionnaire that they would say, how am I feeling? How well am I sleeping? Do I need more rest? And the coaches would make a decision based on the response. It's kind of like a little old fashioned when you think about it, like how you're feeling. Do I need to play you only, at the second half, or do I need to give you some cold water or immersion or, some compression boots, whatever it is. And so we said, well, actually we can do it with genetics. We can actually tell you how this individual responds to that kind of training load versus that individual responding to a training load. And when we looked at the genetics of most of these players, there was a whole lot of stuff happening that they weren't dialed into. So things around inflammation, detoxification, histamine, like glucose and insulin, like these are things that, even collagen, right? Which is such a big deal when you're an athlete. So by being so proactive about understanding response, because remember, genetics is just response. That's essentially what it is. We were able to fine tune their understanding of who they were and take that kind of feedback to a different level, where we were giving the coaches the information saying, in this individual, you really want to make sure you're doubling down on functional training, on rehab, on, cold water immersion, whatever it may be, infrared sauna, whatever it may be. And here's why. And not that they're not going to be the best players, not that they're not going to be playing the full time of the game, but just here's why we want to pay attention on that player there. So there's always something that genetics is going to add in terms of that insight. So we say, genetics is insight, teaches us who we are and why. And then what we do is the action, which is kind of the epigenetics. It's how we're going to make choices that are going to change the gene expression. And the two together is really where we get optimal health, optimal performance, disease prevention, longevity, these things.
It is so cool because I'm nerding out on this a lot right now, where I'm understanding my framework, because I'm exactly that. Like, how do I respond to training loads as opposed to someone else's training loads and different things? And it's funny because I've been playing with a lot of different modalities of training and understanding how my training from a data nerd standpoint has been doing it. I've been playing with one of the apps that you guys are kind of soft launching, the GeneFit, but I've also been playing with this other app, and I had noticed that I was overreaching. The app was telling me, you're overreaching, but I'm like, nah, like I'm okay. Like I'm good. But I think that's just because my mind has always been trained to like, nah, just grunt through it. Then my everything sunk. One day I was just like, boom, I was just like under recovered, and I couldn't get out of that for about 3 to 4 days. And I had to like make sure I doubled down on my recovery, such as like get my infrared sauna in. I made sure to just make sure to get more sleep. I did like all these like massage therapies, like, and I was like, oh wow, like, and it took a minute, but it's just like realizing like, okay, on top of understanding your genetics and making sure that you know what you need for your body from a building block standpoint, from a recovery standpoint, and then tailoring it with like such as an app or understanding your training load. Like the MLS guys, not only are they knowing that, but they got coaches that know their GPS, how many times they've ran.
Yeah. I mean, they do.
It's crazy.
They do. Yeah.
So much stats.
Yeah. I think you need to start with like a framework of understanding where you're at, then applying real world data against that genetic
that's what
data.
GeneFit does, right? So I don't know, Marcus, if you know GeneFit, but
not yet.
So GeneFit is a 3x4 product, and it's specialized in sports. So we have like a whole team that just specializes in sports genetics. And the dream and the vision was, how do you integrate wearable data with genetics? So it's exactly to that conversation. It's like, if I can not only understand my genetics and my recovery, injury susceptibility, oxidative stress, inflammation, what if I could track my training and put it through a lens of genetics? So we have something called GeneFit. It's on my phone. It's linked to my Garmin watch. So every time I train, it uploads my training into my Garmin, and it takes my training with my genes and says, you know what? The idea is not to get to that where you just got to.
Yeah, I wasn't listening at all to it. I was not.
You weren't watching your GeneFit app, but actually we can track our training, and it says, you know what? Your load, so external load versus internal load, like your load is getting too high, you need to pull back a bit. And then you kind of, so it's done in like green, orange, red, and you can actually pull back and see how you come back. And the same with things like muscle and collagen injuries. It's an injury prediction model using genetics plus wearable data. So it's not just, because genetics is kind of static. You do the test, you learn about it, you go and make things. But GeneFit is not static because it's got continuous input from our wearable data. So this is a really exciting space. We've been playing in the space for 2 years. That's also what we've been doing with the MLS players, is looking at training and genetics together.
Yeah. And for the sake of time, and I know we have like a hard stop, which, I mean, I feel like we're just getting into this. With that specifically, the measurement of the strain of the data, like you said, from a Garmin, it's purely looking at like heart rate then, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is basically more so assessing like HRV and things related to that stress, and then how that would be based on your genetic profile, more or less, right?
Got it.
So this app doesn't necessarily tell you what working out you should do, just whether or not there's an overreach kind of coming up based on your like allostatic load.
So exactly like in the nutrition space, where we work with coaches and nutritionists and all these wonderful health professionals who take the information and then decide what to do, it's the same. We're not telling you, we don't know you enough. We don't know what your goals are and everything right now to be able to tell you what your training should be, but we can inform your decision making. But ultimately it's for you and well, you are the coaches. But if you weren't the coaches, to say, okay, this is really, so this for me is going to change the world of sports performance more than anything else in the future. We're the first company to integrate genetics with Wearable. It's so cutting edge. We're learning, we've been doing it for 2 years. We're learning, but not just elite sports teams, and not just, we were talking about the other day about Formula One drivers.
Yeah.
Some of the most elite athletes ever. It's how do we like our neurotransmitters impacted by genetics?
Define an athlete though, Yael. I mean, I know that like pulling G's and stuff is hard on the body and the joints and the bones and stuff, but they don't even get out of the car and lift a finger outside of hold themselves still,
I've been told, and I could be wrong, that they are, by people who train them, compared to other athletes that they train, that they are some of the most elite athletes because of the force on their body while they're sitting in their car. They're not kind of driving a car like we're driving a car. So I'm just saying what I've been told.
I know. I'm yanking your chain here because I think elite.
I mean, I get it.
Yeah. I mean, I had an argument on here before. I was like, well, what defines an athlete? What defines a sport, really? Like, is dance a sport? And I was like,
Marcos.
Hear me out. Hear about my argument. Okay, see, look, you can get involved in this now. Anything that has judging principles in it is not a sport to me. Meaning, there's some subjective person giving some sort of score that they think is the outcome, versus a score that a sport typically has, like soccer. You either get the goal or not, right? It either passes the line and it's scored or not. So to me, a sport has to have that clear definition of like a point or time. Whereas,
so what do you call something like gymnastics, for example? What do we call that?
I call it athletic, but I don't call it a sport.
If it's like a competition, it's just a different.
Oh, so it's using the word sport.
Sport specific. Yes.
Not the physical manifestation of it, but I mean, you could say that Formula One is a but could actually, whoever crosses the line first.
The fastest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So I would classify Formula One more as a sport than I would dance, which again, I'm going to get a lot of flack for that, but that's all we're here for is for controversy.
Gymnastics.
I mean, and look at people that are gymnasts and dancers, their body awareness and their ability to like move their body through space is world class. Obviously, I'm not saying that. Like, I love gymnastics. My daughter has a gymnastics bar over there where she gets to play on it. And I'm dying that she's like loving the fact that she can do a flip on it, right? Like, that is not what I mean in terms of athleticism. We didn't say athlete, we said sport. again, like I said, like I'm a math guy. I need axiomatic principles and I need these things to have clear definitions, because if not, then I have a hard time understanding what we're talking about. Right?
Yeah.
I'll give you that. It's semantics, but I understand,
Yes, it is. It's semantics. And I'm the guy that like, I like black and white, you know what I mean? I live in the area of gray with, psychology, with nutrition. So if you can give me some clear cut stuff, I mean, like you just said,
even if it's your own definition, you're going to take it.
I'm going to take it. And that's, we keep bringing it back for the repeat listeners so they can laugh and they'll text me. They'll be like, hey, I heard that. It's like, dance is definitely a sport. So
I think we need a little controversy on our pod too, Yael. We're very much in the middle for everything. Whenever we bring a guest on, we're never like making absolute claims.
Listen, a controversy for podcasts is awesome. Like the more you can bring it, the better,
Yeah. Well,
I get it.
And so I asked about that, like for the gene fit stuff. So you're blending the ideas, or you're taking a wearable, you're taking, that profile or the SNPs that you guys have like identified, and understanding and kind of catering, like, hey, pull back, risk of injury high, right? Like, or whatever that might particularly look like. You're giving them like, hey, with caution, which I'm assuming in future iterations, it gets better and better, especially as you have maybe more wearables that you tie to, maybe you use some things. But this immediately made me think of, so there's a coach, his name is Travis Mash, and he works with like Olympic weightlifters, right? And so he was always talking about like using that questionnaire plus like velocity-based training, so something else that's obviously slowing on that particular day, to determine the training program for their athletes on particular days, right? You didn't hit your quota for meters per second, you're below 0.8 or whatever, 1 meter per second on your stand-up at whatever that number is, arbitrary number, like 50%, you're done. You're done for the day. You're going to go do hypertrophy. No top end power today, right? And so I'm also interested, like, hey, would some people like that's again, this is a completely different sport than someone like MLS wise, right? They're just pure expression of power. Their training looks way different than the endurance that would be in soccer, right? Almost the opposite end, I would say, right? So having more of that would be really cool, because I think the only thing that I dislike a lot about wearables, it biases cardiovascular training so heavily.
It does. And that's one of our challenges, to be honest. That is our great challenge right now, is especially because even endurance-based training is moving to strength training. And so it's really difficult to capture it as accurately. So it was, most wearables are built on endurance training.
Yeah.
And so that's our challenge right now, is which the team are working on, is how do we capture the quality of that weight training session when wearables are really geared things. So I think it's a general trend, and that's why. And I just want to say, like, that is a great example of the weightlifter. And genetics is never an absolute. It's never an answer for everything. It is just like anything. It is a piece of the puzzle. It's an insight and information. It's informative. But we should never think that that is the only piece of information. So like in your example with the weightlifter, that is a really great way to assess. You've got the questionnaire, you've got like how he's responding to the training, and you've got the genetics, and you've got HRV, and you're putting that all together, and you're going, actually, the genetics is, and this is again where the genetic testing industry did a really shitty job, is they made all these claims, like genetics has all the answers. And if you just, no, not at all. It's insightful. It's who we are. It's our journey, but it's not going to give you an answer out of the context of everything else.
Yeah, 100%. There's always that X factor, and there's always other variables that, like, we just, look, as much as we want to have the full quantified self, like, we just can't. We don't have a algorithmic determinism, like a AI always watching us, which freaking want. But it's funny you say this. So Yael, we're supposed to have this guest today. They are the first app that has now brought in the sports science of the strength, resistance, hypertrophy on top of HRV and cardiovascular, and put it together in an app that is giving you out the components of like where you're training combined just with the cardio wearables like HRV and heart rate, as opposed to your resistance training. They're called Hybrid. We're going to get them on the pod soon. They're launching soon. Nice. Maybe I can connect them with you guys. I can connect them with you guys because they understand. They were
supposed to come to do the podcast today and they canceled. So I was
no. It was after you.
They were after you.
It was going to be back to back.
They moved the day on us.
They moved the day, but it was perfect because they're launching. But I should connect you with them because they are the first ones that have actually understood. Because I'm using yours, I'm using theirs, and yes, I see yours is like that, just more like the HRV, more of the cardiovascular with the genetics component. But they brought sports science of like muscular strength, hypertrophy,
Yeah,
endurance,
I'd like to see that.
and
Yeah.
then they quantified it with tonnage. But then they've also done a good job of quantifying like, okay, the human body movements, push, pull, hinge, squat, core, muscular, and like in each category, and they're like playing it with more. And that's where like when I was showcasing my training, and they're like, okay, here's your volume as opposed to your intensity, and then quantified it against your cardio, and they're like,
Where's it getting the data from?
you type it in, and then you type it. So it's a little bit, it's a
We're
little
not
bit like
seeing it,
that.
but you type it in. But
You can
yeah.
type it in, you could track it with another app because they're
Mm.
integrating with other apps, or you could take a photo of your workouts. But everything else they integrate, they pull from
No,
Apple
it sounds
Health.
interesting. I'll definitely have a look at it. But as I
I'll connect
said,
you with them.
there's a real resistance to you type it in. And
There-
that's one of the great challenges because we're used to, uploading to Strava and, we're used to that kind of, yeah.
No, they have that component too. They have both, like you can track it on another app and it pulls from that app, or
Mm.
you could just type it in yourself. Like they have so many options, you'll see. But look, we're coming up on a few minutes here.
Yeah.
Marcos, any last questions for Yale?
No, I mean, I think I would just I got super fascinated about like velocity based training and that, like with that metric or being able to assess speed, like speed and power. If there's some sort of correlate to that in terms of determining things, maybe that would be something to look into for you. They actually even have it like a visual app that can trace it on the barbell with like a high, like a camera that's as good as your iPhone. Like what, so
Wow.
I'm like, the reason why I'm bringing it up is like me as like more of like, again, I'm the power strength guy according to my genetics, right? And I do know that I do respond better to that type of training,
Yeah.
especially after doing a quarter of my life the last quarter doing some running and being like, wow, like I do feel better. But then like my composition shifted. I was like, well, I don't look as good. So I'm going to go back to the other stuff that apparently expresses my genes a little bit better. So, but no, honestly, this was super informative. And I think I kind of had that feeling like there's likely a reason that would really sell my position at the beginning of the day and why we should have this one. And again, the information that he can then learn more about and choose to talk about over time, like again, it would be how he can, understand all those things, connecting it together. And part of it too is like, I mean, it feels like you then need like a master's like course worth of information, to really handle it. So my last quick question is, how would somebody like myself and Seamus become like really great practitioners of understanding these things? Is it really like sitting in that back clinical dashboard quite a bit? And I know you guys have some other things there with like practitioner
Yeah.
stuff. So what does that look like for people that like want
Yeah,
to dive
so I
deeper?
mean, if you're a trainer, a health coach, a clinician, I mean, we have built an extraordinary platform. It's called 3x Community, where literally, if you don't know what a gene is, and you just want to start learning, or you want to like Seamus, you want to be an expert in the space and you want to be known for it, we have an extraordinary platform that everyone's welcome to. You don't have to sell our genetic tests. You don't have to be in the US. You are welcome to join 3x Community and come learn with us. And every version of it, whether it's sports or whether it's chronic disease prevention, weight, we deal with everything. There's courses, there's continuous education, there's mentorship, there's Q&A. There's literally like, it's kind of the gold standard for genomic education for personalization. So it's not academic. It's like, how do I learn genetics to use it with my clients to do a better job? And so
Yeah.
it's an amazing platform. I know Seamus has played there quite a bit, and everyone, so long as they're working with clients or patients, so it's not a general consumer platform, is welcome to come and join them.
Okay.
Perfect.
So people interested, if it's something that can expand their businesses and their health coaching careers a bit, that might be worthwhile to tie that in. Absolutely. Which is why I wanted to kind of end there. It's a good place to dive deeper for yourself. Like you said, I think these days, this day and age, like while having certain, alphabet soup after your name is like important to some, for a lot of people, they just want to learn it as best they could from those other people. And so like, that's the modern day learning environment, is going to a bunch of different places and hearing their spiel about it. And, you guys might explain X way better than the other company, and they might do this one a little bit better, but at the end of the day, it's like how you, the coach, can do better. So the community thing sounds great. We love communities, right, Seamus?
Yeah,
So,
that's it.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Yael. We're right on the hour, so we'll end it here, but just stay for a few moments for the upload. Thank you guys so much. We'll do a part 2 or continue this conversation later on. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks both of
Thank
you.
you, Yael.
Thank you.